Welcome to the Catholic Midlife podcast, where we're addressing the challenges and the opportunities of midlife from a uniquely Catholic perspective. Join us each week as we spark a midlife renewal and create a firm foundation for the next wonderful, exciting, awesome season of life.
Hello and welcome to the Catholic Midlife Podcast. It is great to be here with you, and we want to thank our listener who shared with us her comments on episode 10. She said, "Love this episode, took many notes. Good news and way to proclaim it. This practical guide in how to approach seeking happiness is excellent." So thank you so much for that, listener. We read all our comments in our Facebook group, which is called the Catholic Midlife Podcast, which is very imaginative, don't you think?
Well, it's clear, at least.
It's clear.
If you're not part of the Facebook group and you'd like to join our conversation there, by all means, come on over to the Catholic Midlife Podcast group.
Great. So I'm Curtis, and I'm here with my other host.
Oh, yeah. This is Karen. Hello.
Karen. Great. So it is great to be here with you today. And we're super excited. We're continuing to talk about relating to your young adult children. And this topic is so helpful, and it's based on lots of experience and feedback.
And research. And
we love to share around this.
We do. And I really am excited for this episode because we want to share with you the top do's and don'ts in relating with your young adult children.
Yeah, so this first one we're really good at this, frankly. We really practice this.
This
first do.
Okay, it's the top do. You mean you and I specifically?
Yes.
We do. Yes, I agree. This has become a pattern and habit in how we relate to our kids.
And what we do is we ask permission before giving advice.
Ooh. Ask permission before giving advice.
Yeah, and sometimes we don't give any advice at all. Mm-hmm. Often we're biting our tongue. So our young adults, at their age, they're very sensitive about their choices. They're sensitive about their boundaries. Maybe they're not sure how to enforce them properly without either they're going to bite your head off or be sullen or whatever. There's lots going on. They're sensitive around autonomy. And so this just keeps coming up. This is one of the things young adult children really hate, and that's unsolicited advice.
Yeah. Yes. I would say it's either the top one or two things that frustrate young adults in their relationships with their parents.
So Karen, knowing me, when somebody gives me unsolicited advice, what kind of reaction do you expect?
Well, let's just say you're not very likely to receive the advice and internalize it.
Yeah, I'll probably explain to you that your advice is really not appreciated. That's because I am an adult. And all of us adults, we really don't react very well to unsolicited advice. So it's not surprising that our young adults don't react well to it either. And
true.
Let me just keep with this. Think about the last time your parents started dishing out the unsolicited advice. How about a little parenting advice, honey?
Well, that's a really good example, Curtis. I think maybe this is sort of a universal tip for all of us. And the thing is, you can have excellent advice. You probably do.
Yeah.
You probably have really good advice. But it doesn't matter how good your advice is, because your young adult wants to choose whether they seek your advice. And that unsolicited advice is just going to be perceived as intrusive, as critical, as judgmental, regardless of how it's meant, and really regardless of how great advice it is. And in some ways, I feel like the transition part of this relationship, it's almost like we have to start earning the right to be heard.
We've got to build up relational capital. That's
Oh,
how I
yes.
like to think about it.
I think that's a great perspective. So it's very easy, I think, for our kids to get kind of resentful and closed off if they feel like they don't have a choice in the communication of advice.
Yeah, having a choice. So God created us with freedom, and it is inseparable. The desire for freedom and autonomy is inseparable for our human nature. And of course, when it's unregulated or not ordered, it gets us into endless trouble. But still, this is our human right and legacy to have autonomy to make our choices. And again, my friends, I'm not saying any choice, okay? I'm saying God made us free, and this is a natural drive to have autonomy because we want to live our life. We want to live the life that God desires for us. So when we are pushing, forcing, constraining our young adult children, naturally, they're going to react. They're going to react with a pushback.
So if we're asking permission to speak into the young adult's life, it's almost like we're giving them back this choice. And I think it goes a really long way to establishing the new kind of relationship and establishing respect and acceptance. And there's a lot of ways to ask, may I speak into your life?
Okay, give us an example.
Okay. Is it okay if I share something with you?
No, Mom, I really don't want to hear it.
Okay. Okay, I respect that.
Okay, great. Where's dinner?
I really don't want to hear about that. Or how about, do you mind if I point out something I'm observing?
Okay. What?
Okay.
So that's good. I mean, that's an ask.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even, I have some thoughts about this. Are you open to me sharing them with you?
Yeah, so it's about asking permission.
Yes.
So Karen, one of your modes is, I've had some experiences around this. Is it okay if I share some of them with you?
Is that what I say?
Yeah, that's one of your things.
Oh, that's good. I didn't even realize that I said that. So yeah, I've had some experiences around this. Do you mind if I share my perspective or experiences?
Yeah, so people will generally give you permission to push ahead if you ask respectfully and genuinely
Right.
for permission. And our young adults will normally allow this. At the same time, I think we don't want to abuse the privilege. We still have to do a lot of tongue biting. And we're resisting the temptation just to dish out the advice because, like we were talking in the last episode, we're trying to step back and give them the responsibility for their own outcomes.
Right. Right. So you're saying don't ask them 10 times a day if you can give them some advice.
Yeah. So even asking for permission, it burns a little bit of relational capital.
Yeah.
But if you're not doing it too often, then actually you're building trust.
You are. And it goes a really, really long way. If you ask permission and they say no, and I've had kids do that, or they'll say, Mom, just not right now, maybe later.
Yeah.
And respecting that, respecting the no, exactly what you said, Curtis, it builds a lot of relational capital. And there's sort of this freedom and relief from the young adult that we're going to respect that.
Yeah. So asking permission, if you must give advice, if it's important to give advice, asking permission is, in our opinion, it's just vital. And I think the other really big rock, the really big landmine out there is judgment.
Yes.
The J word.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say next to unsolicited advice, this would be the thing that our young adults really hate the most, which is feeling or perceiving judgment from their parents.
And again, I think most of us can connect to our own experience with our own parents, even at our not so advanced ages.
Right.
Is sometimes some of that judgment slips out in a particular situation, and we don't like it. We're living our own lives. We're doing the best we can.
Yes. Yes. And one thing is, your young adults are probably really sensitive to judgment, whether or not you are intending to speak in judgment, or whether or not you're intending for some judgment you're making to be communicated. They're just very sensitive to perceiving that in conversation and communication.
Right. So the unsolicited advice often comes across as judgment. I mean, that's why you're giving them the advice, right? Because
Right.
you judge them as deficient in some way. And that's not what we intend as parents, but that's how it can feel when
Yes.
you're on the receiving end of that sort of thing.
So, what's helpful, do you think, when we're trying to embrace a non-judgmental stance towards our young adult?
Well, one thing, Karen, is we don't want to judge their character.
Yeah.
We have to respond to their behavior. And that's how it is as human beings. We have to respond to how each other are behaving. But when we judge their character, that is not helpful.
Right.
And it's not reality. It's not really up to us to decide if they're lazy, if they're, self-indulgent, if they, whatever it is, whatever that judgment is we have about their character, it's really not up to us. It's up to us to respond to their behavior.
So really, if we have an issue or a conflict, or there's something we decide it's important for us to address, even in that, to really focus on behavior and not character can sort of ease the perception of judgment in the whole situation.
Yeah, it's human nature to attribute poor motives to other people in a conflict situation. And also as parents, we can have this sense of guilt or responsibility, or the idea that that child is representing us or representing how good or bad we are by their behavior.
Right.
And so all of that can get piled in, and we can start in with the judgment.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think another thing that can be really helpful when we're trying to embrace non-judgment is, we have this vision of our own about what we think the young adult should do or needs to do or should be doing in their life. And they have their own vision. Our vision is not their vision. They have different perspectives than we do. They have different values. Different things are going to be important to them than are important to us. They'll have their own dreams and their own goals. And there's a desire on their part that we respect that about them, that we respect their perspective on the world and what they want. And this is really hard to do. It's hard to step back and step out of our own framework to really perceive somebody else's framework.
Yeah, the expectations is a big part of it. Often we don't really articulate, even know our own expectations.
Right.
And sometimes you do. I remember Dave, he's a commercial artist, was telling me about deciding he was going to be an artist and go to a graduate school out in California, and how disappointed his family were that he wasn't going to be a doctor or lawyer, because that's what his father and his uncles.
Right. Right. And so there was some family expectations about what people go into.
Yeah. He's also Jewish, and so he made fun of the stereotype that, okay, Jaime, you can You graduated from school. You can do anything in the world now. You can be whatever you want. So what kind of doctor or lawyer do you want to be? So it was really funny. And of course, he went on to be very successful and to defy all stereotypes known to man, I'm sure.
I'm sure. I'm sure. So one thing that I was thinking about non-judgment is really, actually it's funny you mentioned that story, because here's the dad saying, you can be anything you want. What kind of doctor or lawyer do you
Yeah.
want to be? And yet there are open-ended questions that really come across non-judgmentally that can support our kids and help them think more about their situation without sounding judgmental. So things like, well, tell me more about that. Or what are you really hoping for in that? Or even, if it comes down to profession or a job, what feels really aligned to you or what's not aligned to you? What's upsetting you in this whole situation? Or where do you think you're getting stuck? And those kinds of questions cause them to think more deeply about their situation versus, when are you going to find that job?
Yeah, so there's that situation where your young adult is trying to choose their college career or their course of study or the field that they're going to try to enter.
Right.
And you can see as a parent that they're choosing something that's going to make life really hard. They're on a kamikaze course to take this degree that's not at all marketable. Maybe they're going to take on some debt. And how do you approach that? Well, there's not just one answer, but however you approach it, don't be judging them. Instead, you're trying to bring perspectives. You're trying to ask questions to help them think through the situation and how to process it. And if you'll remember, the number one goal in the relationship is to have a healthy and loving relationship with your young adult child.
Right.
And having some relational capital by not giving a bunch of advice when it's not needed, by building the relationship, then when these bigger things come up, you're in a much better position to influence
Right.
them.
Right. Right. And we'll always have influence as parents because our kids will always want a relationship with us and will seek our approval and acceptance. So cultivating your influence while releasing control is a really helpful approach with our young adults.
So, Karen, we covered two of the major do's and don'ts. And the do is always ask permission if you must give advice to your young adult. And the second is don't judge.
Don't judge.
And my friends, there's prudence, some judgment is called for. Plainly, there are situations where you need to step in and seize control of the situation using whatever means possible. And there's situations where you absolutely cannot be an enabler of terrible decisions. There's situations where you know that what they are doing is not morally acceptable. And we understand, by we, I mean all of us, we understand that. And judgment is not suspending your moral values. It's not giving license to whatever it is they think they want to do. But it is releasing, making decisions about their character and about who they are. And all of this is part of our process of shifting to away from a controlling mentality into a mentality that uses influence and lets them take the responsibility for their own outcomes and for their own experiences, because that's where the responsibility belongs, is with them.
Speak it, Curtis.
So let's wrap this up, Karen. We've gotten through our first two do's and don'ts.
Well, we obviously didn't get as far as I thought we would in the conversation. I may have gotten a little off track. So next episode we'll talk some more about some other do's and don'ts in terms of relating to our young adults. And as I've mentioned before, this is a topic that Curtis and I do presentations and workshops on. It's one of our most requested topics. If you have an interest, if you know a group or community that could benefit from some of this material, do reach out and let us know. We can answer any questions you have.
Great. It's great to be here with you, and we'll hear from you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Catholic Midlife podcast. It's great to be here with you. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite app or platform. Leave a review. That's so helpful so that others like you can find the podcast. And be sure to tell your friends. We'll see you next week.